Tonight, we open the scroll of history, not with gods or heroes, but with something far grittier. Ancient Athens. Not the polished marbles and high-minded debates you've seen in textbooks. No philosophers on podiums, no golden-tongued orators serenading democracy. Tonight, you're not Socrates. You're not even a student of Socrates. You're just you, dropped unprepared into the very cradle of Western civilization, barefoot, groggy, and one bad olive away from intestinal collapse. Before we dive into this dusty labyrinth of daily despair, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these midnight wanderings into forgotten lives. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, especially if you're up late in a time zone that would make even an oracle squint. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft hum of distant Mediterranean waves, maybe wrap yourself in something scratchy, and let's wander back to a place where democracy was born, but you were definitely not invited to the birth. Your eyes snap open. The room is dark, not because it's early, but because there are no windows, just slits in the stone wall that allow in light, dust, and the occasional chirping reminder that birds are free and you're not. Welcome to your oikos, not the yogurt, the Athenian household, except this one isn't nestled in a villa. It's a worker's dwelling, which means small, smoky, and slightly damp in ways you don't understand but instinctively fear. You slept on a mat stuffed with reeds, on a floor layered with rushes that haven't been changed in months. Your tunic itches. It always itches. There is no second one. The air smells like a blend of stale olive oil, old fish, and human compromise. Somewhere outside, a rooster screams. Not crows, screams. Because it lives next to you. You stretch, and every bone complains. Congratulations! You've survived another night as a free but poor Athenian male. Emphasis on poor. You are technically part of the democracy. Technically, which means you can vote. But only if you're male, landowning, over 18, not a slave, not a medic, a resident foreigner, and not in debt. So, you. Barely. And only on days when you're not working sun up to sundown, trying not to starve. You look around the room. Your wife, if you have one, is still asleep behind a cloth partition. That's her space. The gyneconitis. Women's quarters. She spends most of her day there, weaving, grinding grain, and trying to keep the household gods from turning against you. Because, yes, the hearth has its own deity. So does the door. So does the wine jug. You live in a pantheon of constant pressure. There's no toilet, of course. Your chamber pot sits politely in the corner, pretending not to notice you as you pretend not to notice it. If it's full, you get to carry it outside and empty it into the street, or into a nearby pit if you're lucky. Try not to trip. Athens may be the mother of cities, but she has zero sympathy for stubbed toes and shattered pots of human waste. You wash your face in a bowl of yesterday's water, hoping the gods don't notice the laziness. You spit out the taste of sleep, but it doesn't help. Your breath smells like fermented lentils and regret. There is no soap. There is no mint. There is only you and your attempt not to offend anyone important before breakfast. Now, you head outside. The sun isn't up, but the noise is. Athens wakes early. Vendors are already setting up stalls in the agora, the central marketplace that doubles as a social hub, courtroom, political circus, and high school reunion for people you actively try to avoid. Chickens cluck, donkeys groan,
Somewhere, a flute player is practicing a melody that sounds suspiciously like failure. You shuffle down the street in worn sandals that offer all the support of a loose leaf. You're headed toward the nearest fountain because running water doesn't exist in your home. The communal fountain house is your only source for drinkable water, gossip, and mild existential dread. You line up behind other citizens, slaves, and medics, each holding a ceramic jug and an expression of barely suppressed tension. You nod to your neighbor, he nods back. No one talks much, it's too early, and the last guy who talked spilled his jug mid-story and got laughed at for a week. The water trickles into your amphora at the speed of indifference. You carry it back carefully, trying not to spill a drop. Every ounce counts, not just for drinking, but for cooking, cleaning, and placating whichever household spirit you forgot to honor last week when your olive supply went rancid.
You've stepped into the light. The Athenian sun doesn't rise, it attacks, blinding, dry, and merciless by mid-morning. No SPF, no hat. Just your threadbare hemaiton pulled over your head like a sad ghost with responsibilities. You're heading to the agora. But let's be clear, not to debate politics. Not unless you're one of the lucky landowners with leisure, learning, and a name people pronounce without sneering. You're here for work. And like most men in your class, that means hauling, crafting, shouting, or sweeping, often all four before lunch. You arrive at the square. It's already a zoo. Stalls overflowing with clay pots, dried fish, rough fabrics, and even rougher wine. Merchants yelling like they're being stabbed, chickens weaving through crowds, philosophers gesturing wildly at unpaid students, and the ever-present aroma of humanity without deodorant. You breathe it all in like a man with no other option. You're a potter, not the glamorous kind who signs amphorae for aristocrats. You're the guy who slaps mud on a wheel until it vaguely resembles a bowl and prays it doesn't crack in the kiln. You rent space in a shared workshop just off the agora. It's hot, cramped, and smells like wet earth and disappointment. Your hands are already blistered, your back already tight, but the work waits for no one, especially not the lower classes of democracy. You settle in at the wheel, foot pumping, hands shaping, over and over again. Clay, spin, curse. Repeat. You make 15 bowls before noon. 11 are usable. 2 are questionable. 2 collapse entirely and take your dignity with them. Across the square, you spot a procession of citizens headed to the Pnyx, the hill where the assembly gathers. You don't join them. You can't. Not today. Not when work calls. Because, see, Athenian democracy wasn't built for balance. You have the right to vote, but not the time. You can't afford to skip a day of labor to go debate silver coinage or whether Sparta is still being weird. So instead, you labor in the shadows of the very system that claims to empower you. A well-dressed man walks by your stall. Doesn't look at you. Doesn't have to. He's a liturgist, the kind of citizen wealthy enough to be required by law to fund public festivals, theater productions, or a trireme if the state asks. He's got a clean cloak, soft hands, and opinions about justice. He has no idea how hard it is to center a bowl on a spinning wheel while your stomach growls and your landlord threatens to evict you. Back to work. The kiln fires are roaring. You feed wood into the mouth of the beast, sweat pouring down your face. The workshop is an oven, and you're the unpaid roast. There's no safety regulation, no fans, just your tunic, your willpower, and a silent prayer to Hephaestus, the only god who might actually understand how much you hate Tuesdays. Somewhere outside, a flute plays. It's tuneless. A boy is practicing or torturing, depending on your perspective. You hear the clanging of armor. A hoplite patrol struts past. Citizen soldiers, armed and proud. You're technically eligible for military service, but your name hasn't been called up this year. Still, you keep your gear ready at home, just in case. Because here, war isn't a matter of if, it's when. Around midday, your stomach begins a protest movement. It chants in sharp pangs. You set down your tools and wipe your hands on a cloth that used to be white and now resembles philosophical ambiguity.
Time for lunch. If you're lucky, you've got some boiled lentils wrapped in yesterday's bread. If you're unlucky, it's just bread. If you're truly cursed, it's just the memory of bread. You eat in silence under a fig tree, watching the people of Athens swirl around you. There's the fishmonger, yelling about squid like it's sacred. A slave girl balancing a water jug twice her size. Two men arguing politics with such intensity, you'd think the gods themselves were voting today. You want to care, you want to join the debate, but your body's tired, your hands ache, and in a few minutes, it's back to the wheel. This is the lie of Athenian democracy. That every citizen has a voice? Technically, yes. Realistically, no. You get one vote in the assembly if you can afford to take the day off, climb the Pnyx, and sit through speeches by men who think grain prices is a fun topic. And if you try to speak, good luck. You'll be shouted down by someone louder, richer, or just more in favor with the gods that day. But you don't complain. Not out loud. That's not how things work here. Grumbling is for symposia, the boozy dinner parties you're never invited to. The closest you get to venting is muttering under your breath as your clay cracks for the third time today and your neighbor accidentally sneezes into your drying stack. The sun creeps westward. Shadows stretch. The market quiets just a bit. And still you work. Because bowls don't sell themselves. And rent doesn't pay itself. And you don't want your wife having to beg the neighbor's wife for barley again this week. You fire the last of your day's work, hands shaking. You're covered in clay dust, sweat, and a faint hint of despair. But the work is done. For now. You pack up, carry what's dry and saleable back toward the roadside stall you share with 3 other craftsmen. You pray someone buys a jug or two tomorrow. On the way home, you pass a small altar to Hermes, god of travelers, merchants, and liars. You nod out of habit. Maybe toss a crumb if you have one. You never know when you'll need a god's favor, especially one who might understand the art of negotiation and subtle theft. The streets are busier now. Kids running barefoot, women with baskets of herbs and gossip. A philosopher is shouting about virtue, and someone else is shouting at him to shut up. You smile, a little. Then you realize your stomach is shouting too. Time for dinner. Time for family. Time for a home that smells like boiled grain and shared exhaustion. And maybe, just maybe, time for a few stolen moments of rest before tomorrow begins again.
You shuffle home at dusk, trailing the scent of smoke, sweat, and whatever the fish vendor dumped in the street. Athens doesn't have a sanitation department. What it has is time. And time has decided that garbage is just part of the architecture now. The streets, they're narrow, uneven, and function less like roads and more like obstacle courses for bad decisions. Potholes, cracks, stray dogs, loose stones, human waste in corners that dare to call themselves alleys. You don't walk through Athens, you survive it. And just when you think it can't get worse, it does. You forgot to visit the public latrine. See, there's no bathroom in your home, not even a bucket with a polite curtain. What you have is a chamber pot, and that chamber pot has limits. So now, with your stomach twisting from bread, lentils, and life, you make the pilgrimage to the neighborhood latrine. A civic institution that smells like philosophy after a storm. It's a modest structure. Stone walls, no roof, holes carved into a long bench, and zero privacy. Welcome to ancient democracy's least democratic space. You lower yourself onto a slab still warm from the last occupant. You make no eye contact. You say no words. You are alone, together, in the worst way possible. A man beside you is humming. Another is eating figs. One is deeply invested in a story about his cousin's goat. You want to vanish into the floor. Then comes the sponge. Yes, that sponge. The communal wiping stick. A wooden handle with a rag on the end, dipped in vinegar water, passed from hand to hand like a cursed relic.
You try not to think about it. You try not to breathe. You do what you must, and you leave with a bit more existential dread than you came in with. You rinse your hands in a communal basin outside. There's no soap, no miracle, just a splash of hope and a prayer to Asclepius that this isn't how you die. Back home, your wife has dinner ready, and by ready we mean boiled grain again, this time with a bit of onion, which feels like luxury. You eat in silence. The child, if you have one, chews noisily. The oil lamp flickers. You consider lighting incense for the household gods, but you're not sure they deserve it tonight. After dinner, there's no theater, no spa, no cozy couch. If you're lucky, you might stroll outside, listen to neighbors argue about taxes or whether the latest tragedy at the Dionysia was too cheerful. You nod along, pretending you have thoughts, pretending your opinion matters. You overhear a heated debate about ostracism. Yes, the real thing. Once a year, citizens vote on who to exile from Athens for 10 years. No trial, no defense, just names scratched onto potsherds, and a quiet walk out of the city if yours comes up too often. Democracy in action. Isn't it beautiful? But you're not important enough to be ostracized. You're just enough of a nobody to stay put and keep turning clay into bowls that break by next Tuesday. Eventually, you drift back home. The night is dark, loud, and unsettling. Athens doesn't sleep quietly. You hear singing from a nearby symposium where the wealthy drink, philosophize, and sometimes vomit their opinions into the street. Laughter, arguing, a flute that's seen better days. Somewhere, someone is praying. Somewhere else, someone's definitely not. You lie down on your mat. The straw pokes your back. The ceiling creaks in a way that inspires more questions than comfort. Your wife sighs. The child mumbles. And for one fleeting moment, you almost understand why philosophers say suffering leads to wisdom. You close your eyes. Morning will come. The wheel will spin. And the gods, fickle, silent, occasionally helpful, will keep watching without blinking. Morning. Again. You're up before the sun because that's the only way to beat the line at the public fountain. Water waits for no one, especially not men who slept too long after a lentil-heavy dinner. The agora is already waking up. Merchants arguing over fish scales. A man swearing he saw a Spartan spy near the temple. Children running barefoot and inventing games that involve yelling and the strategic throwing of stones. You ignore it all. You have a bowl to sell. You reach your stall and arrange your pottery like it matters. It doesn't. Most passerbys will haggle you down to half price or accuse your clay of being too melancholy, whatever that means. One man spends 5 minutes turning a cup in his hand before walking away and buying from your neighbor. You consider becoming a shepherd. Then you remember shepherds don't vote either. Nearby, you hear a slave being berated for dropping a wine jug. The owner is loud, cruel, and deeply insecure. The slave says nothing. You look away. You always look away. That's the thing they don't tell you about democracy. It's built on silence. The silence of women, the silence of slaves, the silence of foreigners who live here, work here, pay taxes here, and still aren't allowed to speak in the assembly. But you're one of the chosen, one of the few, a full citizen with rights. In theory. In practice, you're bargaining over a cracked bowl with a man who smells like goat and disappointment. He offers a single obol. You take it. You wonder if Plato ever had to do this. Probably not. He had time to sit under trees and ponder the forms while you're here trying to keep your family from eating bread that doubles as a blunt weapon. Midday heat creeps in. The market smells of dried fish, hot stone, and armpit. You retreat to a shady spot. A few other potters join you. Conversation is sparse. One man grumbles about the price of barley, another curses the taxes on imports. Someone mentions Pericles in a tone that sounds suspiciously sarcastic. You all nod. Then, out of nowhere, a group of young men in white chitons saunter by laughing. They've just come from the gymnasium, where they exercised, discussed poetry, and avoided work entirely. You envy their clean feet and callus-free hands. They glance at you, not with scorn, not with recognition, but with that particular brand of elite indifference. You might as well be a wall, a clay wall, slightly chipped. You return to your stall. A boy buys a tiny oil flask for his mother. He overpays. You don't correct him. That's your win for the week. The sun dips lower. You pack up, body aching, eyes dry. On your way home, you pass the assembly hill again. They're still shouting, always shouting. Today's debate: should Athens fund another war? The crowd roars. Opinions fly like arrows. You don't stop. You can't. You have to get back. The chamber pot is full. The bread needs soaking. The roof creaks ominously. And your child has questions about gods you barely believe in anymore. You make it home just in time to trip over the doorstep. Again. You curse Hecate, goddess of doorways, just in case she's watching. And as the sky darkens and the oil lamp flickers, you sit in the corner eating boiled grain with onion again. The food of freedom, the flavor of forgotten men. Athens was supposed to be the city of reason, virtue, and freedom. And it is. Just not for everyone.
You wake up with a cough. Not the polite kind. The something's wrong in your lungs kind. Your throat is sore. Your nose bleeds a little when you tilt your head, and your joints feel like you lost a wrestling match with the gods. Congratulations! You're sick. Welcome to ancient Greek medicine, a fascinating blend of guesswork, herbs, and divine negotiation. You could see a doctor, sure, but unless you're wealthy or connected, your physician is probably a part-time barber who learned anatomy by watching goats die. He'll offer you a potion of boiled mint, garlic, and possibly lead. He might recite a hymn. He might ask what color your phlegm is, and then determine whether your spleen is angry or your bile is feeling dramatic. Or he might bleed you, because yes, bloodletting, it's trendy. Too hot? Too cold? Sad? Bled. The humors must be balanced after all. Blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, the four fluids that make you human and also completely impossible to manage. It's like your body is governed by an unstable city council. But maybe you don't even get to see a healer. Maybe you just lie on your mat, wrapped in a scratchy blanket, whispering prayers to Asclepius, god of healing. You promised to leave him a votive offering, a small clay model of your foot or ear, depending on what's failing fastest. You don't know if it works, but it feels better than doing nothing. Ancient medicine was 40% ritual, 50% herbal guesswork, and 10% blind optimism. If things get worse, your wife might carry you, or drag you, to a healing sanctuary, a temple where the priests chant, snakes crawl freely, and the sick sleep overnight on sacred floors hoping for a healing dream. Some claim it works. Some never wake up. But if you're not dying, just suffering, well, that's normal. You go to work anyway. You cough, sneeze, maybe faint, but you go, because there's no such thing as sick leave in the birthplace of democracy. Illness is either a test of character, a punishment from the gods, or a very persuasive reason to drink more wine. And speaking of the gods, they're everywhere. On your way to the agora, you pass at least 6 shrines, 3 altars, and a street performer claiming he can predict your future using chicken bones and interpretive dance. You light a bit of incense at the shrine of Athena, mostly out of habit, partly out of fear.
You're not sure what she does for potters, but insulting the goddess of wisdom feels like a mistake you can't afford. Religion here isn't a choice. It's a lifestyle. You don't worship because you're devout. You worship because you like your house not being struck by lightning and your harvest not turning into a pile of ants. The gods are transactional. You offer prayers, sacrifices, and the occasional bull if you're rich. In return, they might not ruin your week. Might. And if you think avoiding religion makes you edgy, think again. Athenians don't play with impiety. Ask Socrates. Oh wait, you can't. He was executed for corrupting the youth and not believing in the city's gods. He got to drink hemlock and fraud friends. You'll be lucky if your death earns 2 lines on a wax tablet. But what happens if you actually get into legal trouble? That's where the fun begins. You see, Athens is a land of laws, hundreds of them, covering everything from theft and murder to how many figs you can sell without a license. And those laws are enforced not by police, but by you and your fellow citizens. That's right. Justice is peer-to-peer. You get accused, you're going to court, but not a sleek marble hall with robes and gavels. No, you're herded into a loud, chaotic space filled with men who've had too much wine and not enough sleep. Jurors are picked randomly by lot. Hundreds of them. Yes, hundreds, because nothing says fair trial like 501 tired farmers deciding your fate by anonymous pebble vote. You speak for yourself. No lawyers. Just you, your tunic, and a prayer that your voice doesn't crack when you plead not guilty to accidentally insulting someone's sacred olive tree. You have a water clock, a literal jar with holes to time your speech. When the last drop falls, you shut up. If you keep talking, they boo you. If you talk too little, they suspect you're guilty. If you talk just right, they still might vote against you because your nose reminds them of their ex. Punishments? They range from fines, exile, and public shaming to death, usually by hemlock, occasionally by rock, always with a hint of ceremony. You might be given the option of self-exile. Pack up, leave Athens, try your luck in Corinth. Hope your neighbors there don't mind that you once accidentally sold diluted wine. And here's the kicker. Anyone can accuse anyone. Jealous neighbor, bitter ex-client, random guy who doesn't like your face. They can bring a case. Frivolous lawsuits are so common there's a term for professional accusers. Sycophants. Not flattering, just dangerous. You try to keep your head down. You avoid offending your patrons. You say polite things about the city's gods, even if you think Poseidon is kind of a narcissist. Because in Athens, public opinion is a weapon. And once the crowd turns on you, there's no escape. But maybe, just maybe, you live a quiet life. You keep to your pottery, you make your offerings, you get sick, you get better, and you never insult the statue. Still, the fear lingers. Because you know someone, or know someone who went too far, said the wrong thing, or owed the wrong man 2 drachmae. And now they're gone. Not in a move to the islands way. In a we don't talk about it way. This isn't the Athens of tourist brochures. This is the Athens that sweats, bleeds, and buries its poor quietly. And when death does come, eventually, uninvited, it comes without ceremony. If you're lucky, your body is washed, anointed, and buried just outside the city walls. If you're not, it's a shallow grave or a pyre with strangers. The only prayer is that someone, anyone, lights the flame. Because in Greek belief, an unburied soul wanders forever, which frankly feels redundant. You've already been wandering through this city your whole life, working, praying, sweating, voting when allowed, and apologizing to statues just in case. And in the end, all you really want is rest. Actual rest. Not the kind where you're awake at dawn shaping clay with a broken back and a half-healed fever. Just a little piece. But not yet, because the agora opens in an hour, and there's still work to do.
The sun is low, the clay is dry, and your hands look like they've been through a minor war, which they have, against a kiln, a marketplace, and the soul-grinding machinery of daily survival. But there's one consolation. Tonight is the Dionysia. Ah, yes, the great festival of Dionysus, god of wine, drama, and wildly inappropriate decisions. It's one of the few times you don't feel invisible. Every citizen, poor or powerful, is invited to the theater. Free entry, paid for by a liturgy, some rich man's very public way of buying social clout. You get a seat on the hard stone benches, a chunk of bread, and a chance to forget that your back hurts more than your future. You shuffle into the theater of Dionysus with the crowd. It's massive, thousands of people. All male citizens, of course. Women can't attend unless they're special priestesses, which your wife definitely isn't. She stays home weaving, caring for your child, and probably muttering about how the gods get parties while mortals get wrinkles. The performance begins. A tragedy, naturally. A nobleman curses the gods, loses his family, his status, and eventually his life. All in 3 acts. The audience sobs, not because it's sad, but because it's familiar. You too feel cursed. You too have lost things, time, energy, hope. But instead of a chorus, you have a neighbor who whistles through his teeth, and a guy behind you loudly eating olives. Next up, a comedy. Crude jokes, mocking politicians, scatological puns about Zeus's love life, and endless jabs at foreigners. The crowd roars. You laugh too, mostly out of obligation. Humor is survival here. Mock the system before it mocks you, or exiles you, or worse, taxes you. But as you watch, a strange thing happens. For just a moment, you feel like you belong. Like this massive, messy, sweaty democracy sees you. You, the potter, the poor man, the one who walks past statues and wonders if they ever hear your prayers. You know it won't last. It never does. As the theater empties and citizens stumble into the night, drunk on cheap wine and poetic injustice, you walk home. The city glows with torchlight. The Acropolis looms above, massive and indifferent. Its temples glitter with gold, funded by your taxes, and by your, we mean the city's collective laborers, the builders, the miners, the craftsmen. You look up at the statue of Athena Promachos, spear raised, watching over the city, the protectress of wisdom, warfare, and civic virtue. She's carved in marble, cold, imposing, beautiful, and utterly detached from the people who need her most. You wonder if she remembers the names of those who carved her. Probably not. The closer you get to your home, the more reality creeps in. You pass a sick man huddled under a blanket. No one stops. You pass a slave chained to a post, eyes vacant, face swollen. No one looks. You see a woman crying quietly outside a locked door. She's a medic, a foreign resident. No citizenship, no rights, no voice. You say nothing. You do nothing. You can't afford to. Because here's the dirty truth of democracy. It's not for everyone. Yes, you vote, sometimes, when your boss lets you leave the stall early, when your name isn't skipped, when the assembly isn't too far or the debate too long or the issue too dense for someone who hasn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days. Yes, you're a citizen, on paper, but the system, the real humming engine of Athens, belongs to the rich, the literate, the loud, the ones who host symposia, the ones who own land, not just rent it, the ones whose names are etched in marble and memory, not scratched on broken pots. You're the scaffolding, the framework holding up the democracy they're so proud of. You vote for wars you don't benefit from. You build ships you'll never sail. You carve statues you'll never be buried beneath. Your life, it's not heroic. It's not poetic. It's functional.
And Athens, glorious, wise, radiant Athens, needs functional. But sometimes the function dreams. You reach home. The door creaks. Inside, it's quiet. Your wife is asleep. Your child is curled up like a cat, limbs askew. The oil lamp flickers low, nearly out. You sit on your mat and stare into the flame. You think about what tomorrow brings. More labor, more bargaining, maybe an argument with a neighbor over whose goat chewed what, maybe a cracked pot you can't afford to replace. Maybe, if the gods are cruel, jury duty. But there will also be bread, maybe onions, laughter from the children playing in the street, a moment under a fig tree, a nod from the old man who used to sell you fish before he lost his teeth, a conversation about whether Alcibiades is a traitor or just misunderstood again. And that's what you hold on to. Not the democracy they brag about in the assembly, not the plays written by men you'll never meet, but the stubborn, steady rhythm of daily life, the grit between your fingers, the clay under your nails, the knowledge that even if you aren't remembered, you built something. Tomorrow, you'll vote, if you can. You'll shape bowls, if they sell. You'll pray, even if the gods don't answer. Because you are an Athenian, not a hero, not a philosopher, not a name the historians will ever care about. But you're here, living, working, watching the sun rise over a city that speaks your language but forgets your name.